Okay, what's up, everybody? Welcome to week 3. Doing our live session. Hope everyone's having a good week so far. So it's going to be a pretty fun activity for you guys. You finally get to see some color instead of just staring at gray shaded models inside of Maya. Yeah, week 3 is usually pretty good. Week 4 is also pretty got a couple pretty fun activities for you. So the main thing we're talking about here is going to be pretty much going to be this activity right here. I'm not going to go through all of 3.3. I'm going to do a little bit of it, but I mainly want to just kind of spend some time talking about just the rendering process with you guys and how rendering works. I want to point out a couple of videos too that are really important for some of you guys to watch. I know a few of you have run into some pretty bad crashing issues as soon as you got to render ban, and some of that is related to a bug that we're all pretty aware of. And unfortunately, at the moment, because we haven't figured out how to fix it, as far as like why the bug's happening, we do have like a workaround to prevent it from crashing. But yeah, it's gonna be all about render ban. Later in the week, we're gonna be doing some, or well, you guys later in the week are going to be doing your lighting on the environment project. So you're pretty much picking up where you guys left off with, last week's stuff. And then beginning of next week, 4.1, you're going to be using the character project, doing some lighting with that one. So it's going to be lighting and rendering from here on out. And then kind of near the end of week 4, we'll get into the presentation. Okay, if you're still running into crashing issues, what I may do is try to meet with some of you one-on-one after the live session. I have like a small window between my two meetings, between Shading and Lighting 1 and Shading and Lighting 2. So Aspen, if you want, you can kind of just stick around after the live session, and I'll maybe do a screen share with you, and we'll see if we can figure it out. All right, so the thing I want to point out first, just in case you guys haven't watched these, are right here. This section right here is super important, and I know you guys are watching all the regular playlists, like that's all pretty straightforward. These are a couple big ones, and I'm going to run through these today super quick anyway in the live session. I'm not going to spend nearly as much time talking about it, but I'm just going to run through kind of how to fix this stuff. But basically, there's an issue inside of Maya where as soon as you guys have the attribute editor open and there's any render ban light, it doesn't matter what it is, a dome light, a regular light, it could be something from the preset browser where you're loading in one of these guys like a light rig. All of them do the same thing. The issue is this little section right here. So the icon that it's trying to draw for the light is what's causing Maya to crash. It's kind of stupid. Like, I don't know why this is causing it to crash, but it is. And so there's a couple things we can do to prevent that icon from showing up, so you guys don't run into the crashing issue. We've had a pretty good success rate with this. I don't think there's been anybody that we haven't been able to fix the issue with. So if you guys are experiencing problems, just kind of be patient. I'm going to try to meet with you guys one-on-one, and we'll make sure we get it working. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's actually load up the environment project for 3.3. I'm going to copy that to my desktop, and then we're just going to talk about the rendering process just a little bit with that one, and then for the last half of the lecture, we'll get into activity 3.3. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Got it open. And what I'm going to do is go up to File, and we're going to set our project just like we've been doing before, right? We have a full project set, so File, Set Project. And then I'm going to go back here to the desktop, and I'm just going to source the one that I copied over here. So this has all the same folders, all these random Maya files are in there. You guys don't have this many. You probably have like the original environment file, the camera file, probably the challenge file. But we'll start with, let me actually, Let me set it first, and I think I'm going to start with the cam file. All right, so we're going to do, there's my project folder, set. We're going to come up to the open button at the top, and now that it's set, you can see it's already defaulting to the right directory. Open is immediately going to that project scenes folder, and we're going to open up the camera file. And what I'm going to do real quick here is just bring in the telescope and just get that positioned super fast, just so that's out of the way. And I've been mentioning this to you guys quite a bit in the video critiques. You guys know about the black shading issue. It's just something in the viewport. If you turn on backface culling, you can see through the wall, and it's not going to be black. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm using some of my orthographic cameras to navigate around pretty quick. I'm using something called the Hotbox, and I don't think many people are using it yet. Maybe some of you have already figured this out. I'm holding space, and if I click in the center where it says Maya, I can pick which camera I want to look through. So if I want to go to the top, I'll click on top, W, zoom in. I can kind of move it roughly where I want, go to like space and click and go to the right camera. And what it's going to allow me to do is just kind of get this thing aligned a little bit better without spending as much time trying to get my perspective camera very close. So we'll do something like that. It's going to get kind of low. That looks pretty good, actually. All right, and we'll scale that down. I think most of you guys were doing about 0.6. We'll do that. All right, and we'll just find the tilt group and just tilt that up. Whoops, there we go. Let's go in here, rotate these guys super quick. We'll just open them up just a little bit. We're not going to push it too far. Okay, we're opening that, and I got my little latch. We can just drop that guy down since we're no longer keeping those latched together. So there we go. We just did activity 2.3. Now let me just save this real fast, and we're going to call this one Environment Challenge, and we're ready to go. Okay. So we're all set, and what I want to do is just run through a few different lighting scenarios here and show you kind of how this works. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit into 3.3. Actually, let's go back to 3.1. So you know how you guys were in the preset browser, and then in that activity, you all had to bring in the Annecy light source. We're going to use a different one today just to change it up a little bit. Let's use the observatory. So on outdoor, I'm just going to right click. I'm just going to do import. And what that's going to do is just bring in this massive image. It's huge. You can kind of see what it looks like here if I just move the camera around. Okay. If we back up even farther, you'll notice that we're able to travel outside of it, right? It sort of looks just like a giant ball or a sphere that shows the world around you. So this is an HDR image. It's something we're going to be using quite a bit later in the week with activity 3.3. Now the only reason I'm making this right now is because I want to do a couple quick renders and to show you guys how to fix the crashing issue and how to make your renders a lot more efficient. So first off, how do we render? That's the big thing. Well, you have to remember that RenderMan is a plugin, and so by default, we don't really see any of this RenderMan stuff unless you've already, turned the plugin on. Actually, one update back from you guys. I think you're all on 23.1. I'm on RenderMan 23, and eventually, in a few months, you'll have to renew your RenderMan license. It'll pop up saying, "Hey, the license needs to be renewed." I think it's about every 3 to 6 months. They've changed it a couple times, but it'll say, "Hey, you need to renew your license." You're going to see a little thing pop up. You're going to hit the button. It'll take you to a survey. You just fill out some information about who you are, what softwares you're using, what do you think of the RenderMan software, and then you hit submit, and it's going to basically update your license for you to keep going so you can use it for another set amount of time. So as long as you keep doing the survey and just updating your license, you'll essentially be able to use RenderMan through the entire time at full sale. Yep, you can also hear my cat. He is screaming in the background. He's actually being very bad today. All right, let's look through, and we'll do this guy. So I'm going to do a split view, and I'm going to have this be set to cam 1, and we're going to make this my perspective view. All right, so I want to see the render, and then we're going to use this to just to edit, click on things, move things around a little bit. And let's actually also turn this thing, because I don't really want it facing directly at the camera. We'll do something a bit more interesting like that. There we go. All right, now to do a render, you guys know that we have this little R right here in the corner, right? So what this is going to do is once RenderMan's running, and you see all this fun stuff, the little R in the corner, this wasn't here, by the way, before you got to this activity. This is all part of RenderMan. If you hit it, it's going to turn whatever viewport you hit that button on into a RenderMan viewport. And it's immediately trying to render whatever it thinks the illumination should look like. Now, it's very blue, right? So why is it so blue? Why is it so grainy? And if you just think about, well, what light would be hitting this part of the scene, just turn your camera around, and here's what you got. So what is back there? Why are we getting a lot of blue light? It's a really pretty dark sky. You know, the sun is probably setting behind us somewhere, and we're getting a lot of blue. There is a little bit of like orange where the sun is hitting the building and bouncing back, and you can kind of see that a little bit along some of the railing. So it's definitely working. And we're able to rotate this thing, right? So this will actually update if you start rotating the environment light. So we're going to do that a little bit here once we get to activity 3.3. But I think what I'm going to do, actually, let me at least get some sunlight in here. So see how right now, if back in the corner, the sun's behind the building. That's why we're not getting a whole lot of it. So I want to spin the world. Now you want to be careful about this, and this probably might seem kind of obvious to you guys, but why do you think? Because you could rotate this thing any way you want. Can you think of any issue with you rotating your light source like this? Because it will change, and you can tell we are getting light, like it's technically still doing something. I mean, it's an image, but what do you think the problem would be with doing something like this? I'll let you guys think about that for a second. Aside from it looking just weird, you know, like in the viewport. Like, that doesn't feel natural. Yep. And John is totally right. It is not real. This is not how reality works, right? We're always striving for realism, and so we know the sky's always up. We know the ground is typically flat. We're not flat Earth flat, but it's for the most part flat. And we expect the sun to always be in a certain angle. The clouds are above us. You know, there's dirt on the ground. When you break that and you start doing things like this, you're actually telling the building that it is leaning severely in relation to the ground. The sun doesn't even do like a natural arc across the sky anymore. It's going to sink below this ground, way below the ground. And now potentially at a different time of day, we'd have sun coming from below the dirt and trying to do something. That's not how any of this works. So we're going to reset the rotation back to 0. What we want to do is just rotate it with Y. I don't mind spinning it. I just don't want to get into this or this. So rotate Y is fine. And what we're going to do is just turn it. And eventually you'll notice if I keep spinning it, we will actually get the sunlight, right? We're coming from an extreme angle way over here, casting in, and you can see that updating immediately in the render. So this feels better, right? Like, we're not getting shadow angles. Like, I mean, if you tilted this down, like, you're gonna have sun rays and shadows like going up vertically. So I can actually do that. You'll see how weird this looks. If I tilt it, look at the shadows in a second. Isn't that odd? Sun shadow, like shadows from the sun should not be casting upward. Yeah, it's so. Larry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you're asking, is there a reason why we would ever want to rotate it, like, and do something very strange like that? If that's what you're referring to, yes. I mean, technically, like you can do whatever you want. If you were doing something where maybe, I'm trying to think of let's say there's a couple shots where it's not a building. Maybe there's a shot where the entire world is actually upside down and like someone's falling and you have like a spinning camera. There might be some weird scenarios like that where you want the entire sky to also be flipped, like some type of inverted world scenario. Now, honestly, like even though I know it looks weird when we're looking at the image like this, we understand it shouldn't be doing that. But you have to remember too, like the viewer isn't seeing any of this. He's really just seeing what it looks like here. And so if the viewer, if it still looks kind of cool and you like the colors, you like the way the shadows are going, um, that's really all that matters. And if the viewer doesn't see this, he might not know, be any wiser that there's actually like a problem with the way you set it up. Because as long as it still looks good here for whatever you need to do or whatever the client needs, at the end of the day, that's kind of what's important. So there's going to be a lot of cases where even though in reality it shouldn't be doing that, sure, you could change it. You might get a really cool result with it, and you could kind of go with that. So there's some things I used to do before with another type of light where I'd make these gradients. You guys know what the gradient tool is in Photoshop, where you kind of get those like transitions between colors. You can actually put gradients on polyspheres and Pixar dome lights and actually get them to like fake the gradient. So like if you didn't have an image, I could actually sort of fake it by making all these like brown dirt areas and gradients that go from like light blue to dark blue, and on this side it kind of goes into like purples, and you can actually almost make your own type of lighting image just by mixing all these different colors together. So that's a whole other topic, but you might learn about that later. All right, so I'm just going to spin this back a little bit to get a bit more contrast. There we go. But it does look pretty cool, right? Finally seeing some color and lighting. All right, now let's get into some of the way the render is going to work. So this button right here, we turn it on and off, it initiates the render. Now there's a couple really important things that you guys need to be doing when you're rendering something. The big one is when you render, it is a extremely intensive process for your poor laptop. So let's think about your laptop for a second. We all know these have a couple problems. There's a lot of updates we have to run when we first get it. You guys probably hear the fan kick on randomly at various points where it sounds like it's a jet engine, about to, take off here. Rendering is intense, and so typically when you're rendering something, you're going to notice a lot of other things you're doing aside from the render really start to slow down. Now for me especially, because I have Maya open, I'm doing a render, I've got a couple Chrome tabs open on another monitor, OBS is streaming, I got folders open, there's a lot going on, like Windows 10 is running, the whole time. And so we want to find these ways to make the render a lot more efficient. And one big one that some of you guys have already done, but I'm just going to bring it up here, is in the Maya preferences right here. You're going to go down to RenderMan. I want you guys to change this from -2 to -6. So it defaults at -2. So if you guys have never been in here before, it's currently set to -2. You guys are going to put it to -6. I have a video that talks about this in quite a bit of detail. It's about your processor and how many threads and cores your processor has, but essentially when you put it to -6, you are telling the render to not use as much of your processor's power, and it's going to put more of that back into your laptop. It does mean the render's a little slower, updating, but it means you can still move around and do things. And for me, that's more important. Like when the render's on, if you can't actually move and click on things and move the camera, then at that point it defeats the whole purpose of even doing this, because you're basically crippled the entire time. It's like working with one hand tied behind your back. So we want to definitely put that to -6 just so it's a bit more efficient outside of the render when this is running. Now the other big thing is going to be this button right here. So 3 from the left. Again, some of you have already done this. I want you guys to change this from 100 to 50%. And I'm going to show you the difference here. I'm going to just turn it off. Here's 100. Watch the render. Now, hopefully this shows up pretty well in the stream, but I want you to make a couple notes about things. First off, look at how sharp the image is and how detailed it is. Right, it's pretty crisp, but did you guys see how slow it was trying to draw that thing when I started it? Let's do it again. See how it's like slowly wiping out from the center in that radial shape, and it's just finally about through one pass, and now it's starting to go outside there, right? That is slow. Now, if I do the same thing at 50%, look at the speed this time. Look at how much faster that is. Now, there is its little difference here. You might notice that the quality of the image and the detail is a little softer. It's not quite as sharp, but the speed in which this thing is going to respond is so much better for you guys. The whole point of rendering in the viewport is you're not trying to create your masterpiece here. This is not you getting the final image. All you're using the viewport for is to get a really quick, rough idea of what's happening. You want quick feedback. I want to say, all right, you know, I like the image is working. I verified that works. I'm not happy with the shadow. I want to be able to go in here, rotate the light a little bit to play around with the shadow and get immediate information back. I don't want this thing to be spending minutes every time I move something and waiting for it to update. It's not a very, you know, efficient way to work. So it's 50% a lot faster. Now, if you really want to speed it up, you could even go down to 25% or 33%. This is going to be much faster, but once you start knocking it down really low, I mean, yeah, it's quick, but it, you know, it gets to the point where it starts getting so soft that you might have a hard time seeing the detail in the image. So for me, my little happy spot is right around 50. If you guys want to go lower, you're more than welcome to do that. You can stick at 100%, but I'm telling you, it is going to be pretty slow getting your updates. So I think 50 is going to be a good balance for you guys. And the reason why we're dropping this down too, by the way, is really just because you know how you guys have a 4K display? That's the reason why it's important to knock it down, because the viewport is pulling from your monitor's resolution. And since all these Alienware laptops and Windows by default are set to 4K resolution, even this little part of your 4K screen is a big image. And so we're trying to basically cut that back so it's not really using some crazy, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 pixel tall, you know, image here that's still, you know, almost 1,000 pixels wide. We're trying to knock it down just so it's a little bit quicker. All right, now the other thing I want to show you real quick, this is related to the crashing issue. So this little icon is what's causing it to break all the time. Anytime the attribute editor is open and it draws that guy, that's when Maya throws the fatal error and shuts down. It's an easy fix. The problem with it is to fix it, you have to be in an empty scene, but the main thing you're trying to do is in a new empty file, not the file you're working on, like an empty scene with nothing in it. You have to go into the Hypershade, that's this button right here, right next to the render settings, that little ball. You go in here, and you're going to turn this button from on to off, and you're going to change this button from icon to list. So this is it showing icons in the Hypershade. This is really the big one that's causing the issue. This is what's causing this thing to not draw. If you turn it on, it will draw it. And if you double click on that thing, it will also force the icon to appear. Now I'm going to do it. I don't want you guys doing this, but if I double click, my icon works. But that little harmless thing right there is, for some reason, what's causing many, many students' laptops to freak out and crash when it's open. So we're just preventing that from showing up. So once you do this and you get that stuff working in the Hypershade, don't go double clicking on these, because that is you forcing the icon to update. As soon as you double click, it's going to kill the software and it's going to crash on you. So that's the thing I'm really trying to, like, just be proactive and do it. Save yourself the headache. Okay. Oh, I think my thing just kind of buffered there for a minute. All right, so let's, yeah, I think I'm back. Yeah, the feed just kind of cut out there for a second. Basically, all I was saying was for you guys to go watch that crashing video, fix those things in the Hypershade, and do it even if you haven't had it crash yet. Just be proactive and do it, and just avoid the headache later on. It's going to be well worth it. Okay. Now, eventually you guys are going to want to do a final render. So this is a viewport render, and you can do it in any camera. You can do the perspective if you wanted to. Now, the final one over here, on the shelf, we have a bunch of other buttons that look really similar. There's a blue R here. There's a blue R here. This one right here is for rendering your final image. This is what you guys were using to do your final renders. Now, I want you to notice a little issue here with the image tool. What camera is it currently using? It's this one, right? So we have to make sure that we tell the image tool which one to use. Now, it's a little tricky sometimes. So what I'm going to do is hit cancel just to stop it for a minute. It's based on what your active viewport is. So here, it's because I selected in this one last, it's using perspective. If I just simply click on this other viewport, that's enough for it to understand this is the one we're rendering from. So you want to make sure you select in the viewport you want to use for your right camera. The next time you hit the blue R, it will render with the correct camera. Okay, so there we go. Here is perspective. There's the new one. And you can see it just makes a list. Every time you start a new image, it just adds it to the list in the catalog. We have all these things here you can hide and show. There's catalog, which is C. There's your catalog. Oops, C, right? Inspector's I. I don't use this very often, but there's I. There's a bunch of other stuff in here. I'll let you guys watch the videos. It's all back in 3.1, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. But if you're not sure how to use the image tool, what the different windows are, this guy right here, burn-in mapping on save. A bunch of people, need to be careful about that. And how to export your image with the export file. Just check the videos in 3.1. It'll explain it. And I do talk about this again, even in the other activities coming up. It's just one of the last videos in the playlist, like once you're done with the project. All right, so we're going to cancel the image again, so it doesn't go forever. But this is where we would save our final render. Okay. I think I'm feeling pretty good about all that. Do you guys have any questions so far about any of that? As far as like just turning on the render. It'll all update when you move lights. It updates when you move objects, when you create new lights. As long as that thing's running, it will, every time you do something, it will restart and try to draw the information with whatever you're doing. Okay, I think we're all good. Yeah, I think that's it. Let me hop into 3.3 just a little bit. So I'm just going to click on the light, and we're going to delete it. All right, let me bring up 3.3. Okay, we're going to go back here. We're going to come down. And the goal for this one, this is our big project for the weekend. We have a couple different reference images you're going to download, a bunch of HDR images as well. And we're going to be using these to, most of them you're trying to match, like the day, sunrise, and night. You're going to try to match these to the best of your ability. And then the bonus one, you're only doing one bonus image. Including 4 in the download, just because I want you guys to see the ones I made, just for ideas if you're not sure what to do. But the bonus ones look like this. These are just 4 different lighting setups I created. You don't have to match them. I mean, you can if you don't really know what you want to do. But these are just things I kind of came up with, just with putting lights inside, outside, using different light colors. And we're going to play around with this before we're out of here today anyway. But let's do, how about I do one of these? We'll just kind of talk about the process of matching the light. And then I might jump into the bonus light. And we'll just have fun and kind of create something sort of unique. I'm going to do the first one. We're going to do the daylight. So we want to look at the reference image. It's telling you what lights are used. Okay, it's a Pixar dome light. The Pixar dome light, by the way, is the same thing that you guys were bringing in from the preset browser. So the Annecy light source you guys used in 3.1, that is a Pixar dome light. We just have to use a different image on it, so it's not that the observatory that we had earlier. Okay, we're going to put it on a display layer. So once we make the light, we're going to put it on a layer. That way we can just simply turn it off when we're done, so we're not really ever deleting anything. And then hopefully once we get it in there, we're going to do our best to get a really good match to the reference. So I'm saying that you need to match like the intensity, color, light. Really, as long as you guys get the rotation right and you have the image connected, it should line up on its own. You shouldn't have to do a whole lot of work to get these to be a very, very close match. And some of you guys will probably obsess over this and nitpick this to death, where it is very close to the point where I'm not even sure if it's even your render. I know you all have different camera angles, so that will kind of help me out, but some of you are going to get extremely close to matching. And if that's what you're doing, that's better for me. So I actually like it when people spend a lot of time working on these to the point where I'm like questioning if you have my own Maya file. Lets me know that you guys are putting in a lot of time on that thing. All right, so let's load up one of the images here real quick. Okay, there we go. Here they are. So here's one of them right here. And these are, again, they're all in the downloads. You're just going to download them. We're just going to open this up. I'm going to throw this off to the side just so we can see it. Kind of like what we did before with like the cameras, where I was just throwing this on the side. Yeah, we're going to do that, and I'm going to keep the attribute editor open. What I'm trying to do is get all my space figured out here so I can still see the render. I still want to see the attribute editor because I'm going to have to modify some stuff in here, and I'm hoping to still move in perspective. Yeah, we're pretty limited right now, so I might just scale that in a little bit. Yeah, let's try to bring that down. I'm going to push that off the screen because I really need to get a bit more information. Okay. The struggle is real. All right, that should work. There we go. Wow. Do we have any more things open at this point? So we're going to make our Pixar dome light. Now, because this time we're making it from scratch, we're not using any of the ones from the preset browser. These are dead to us. We don't need them. We're going to go over here in the RenderMan shelf, and we have a bunch of buttons up at the top. So the main section you guys are worrying about this week is going to be right through here. So these are our render buttons, especially this one. These two are where we make our lights. Now the first one right here, you'll notice both these buttons have these little arrows in the corner. The arrow just means you can right click. So if you right click on a light, or the icon, there's all these different lights that you can create from this one little menu. Rectangular lights, disc lights, spherical lights. We're going to make a few of these later. But for now, we only need a dome light. So if I right click on the second button, there's the dome light. And we're going to click. It makes it. Isn't that beautiful? You like all that detail we're getting from the dome light? So it's pretty boring, right? It's white. Now if you render it, it's going to do exactly what you think it's going to do. Here's me rendering my perfectly white sky. Wow, that's exciting. It's gray and different shades of white. Right, so it's not the most exciting. Before, at least we were getting like sunlight and blues and warm colors and bounce light from the ground. We're not getting any of that because there is nothing here. It's evenly emitting white light from all angles, and we get something that looks like that. So what we want to do is back here is we need to load in the image. So San Giuseppe Bridge 4K.HDR. So let's do that. And this will probably sound familiar to you, John, because you were just battling with this. I'm going to hit the folder. Let me actually go back to how it looks typically. Oh, of course it's going to show these. This is not quite what I wanted. In the source images folder, this is where you're going to put your textures. So when you download them, make sure you're moving your HDR images into the source images folder of your project. So just like you guys are putting Maya files in the scenes folder, you're putting your textures, in this case, the texture for the light, is going to go into the source images folder. Now, when you guys first go in here, it's going to look like this folder is empty. It is not actually empty. Mine's showing it because I've already changed this, but it's going to look empty because at the bottom, the file type is going to be set to something called textures. Textures means this window is only going to show you .text format images. Your images you're using are .hdr. So if you don't see any of the images in here and you know they're in there, you have done nothing wrong. All you've got to do is simply go to the bottom and say file type is going to go from textures to images or any. Images will show you HDR, not the .text. Any will show you everything. It'll show you the .text version and the .hdr version. Now, because you guys, you haven't seen these yet, all you're going to see are these HDR images. The .text things that you're seeing right here, these are created automatically the first time you render with one of these images. So because I've already rendered all of these before, because I've done a lot of different videos and lectures, mine has already generated the .text files. You just haven't done that yet. Yeah, just do any. You're going to see your image in there. Look through the list, find the one you want, like San Giuseppe Bridge 4K, load it in, and you'll see it does eventually pop in. There we go. Right, I can Alt left, move the camera around. We can see everything. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Click off. Oh, don't know why it is not showing the path there. That's slightly alarming. That's a little weird. Let me see if it renders. It should work. Yeah, it's working. I don't, normally it shows the path here for you guys. I don't know why mine's not doing it. It's probably some just weird little glitch where it's not showing me the location. But I mean, you can clearly tell it is working. The image is here. We can see it. It looks like it's generating something that's not white. We're good. Uh, I'm sure if I closed out of mine and reopened it, it'll probably show up here in the path. But I'm not too concerned about that. It looks good. Now, it is loading it. Let me do this whole backface culling thing as well so I can see through there. There we go. Now, it's a lot of warm colors. So where's that coming from? Well, it's the buildings, right? The sun is back here. And so what we're getting on the balcony is the sun coming over, blasting the buildings behind the camera. We get all this warm bounced light ricocheting back, hitting here. We're getting bounced light. That's it. It's red bounced light from all the warm buildings behind us. So just like before, if we start rotating this, and remember, we're going to rotate it with just Y, eventually, if you just watch the render, you'll notice you start to get sunlight, right? Start to creep around from the right again. Now in the reference, how do we get this to match? I have sun coming from the right. The reference shows it coming from the left. The shadow's going the wrong way. So these are the little clues you guys are going to use to try to line things up. Don't worry about changing any of the settings or any of that. Just focus on rotation. So I'm going to keep spinning it. Okay. And eventually when I put the light so it's right behind the camera, it's going to look very, very flat. So just in a second here, yeah, we're almost directly behind the camera. So right about here, that guy is, yeah, it's right up there, right behind us. So very, very boring, flat image. It's actually, what you're seeing here is kind of the issue with flash photography. So you guys have probably, taken, pictures with your phone before. You've had flash kick on, then you look at the photo and you're like, well, this looks terrible. That's because the light is coming from the same position you're viewing it from. Like the flash from your camera is really close to where it's actually taking the photo. And so you have all these light rays coming directly out and hitting whatever you're looking at head on, and you get extremely flat lighting and you can't see any shadows. So it's usually a bit more interesting when you have it rotated from the side and you get more of an angular effect with the lighting. So I'm just going to keep turning it until I see that shadow pop up on the other side. And I'm going to have to keep extending it because I need it to go far enough over where it goes right past that railing. Okay, we're going to keep going. And right about... It's easy for me because I'm literally using the same camera. It's going to be a little trickier for you guys because your camera is in a little bit different position. And by the way, if you feel like based on your camera, if it's really hard to tell if your light is lining up, don't feel like you have to use the cameras you set up before. I'm totally fine with you guys moving your cameras. You can use the perspective camera. You can change it up and do whatever you need to do to get it working. And you can also use a different camera temporarily. Like you guys could make a camera that does look really similar to the reference just to line up the light. And then when you do your final render, you could just quickly swap back over to yours. So sometimes I'll do that where I have multiple cameras set up just so I can see the light from different angles. It doesn't mean I'm going to... My laptop freaked out there for a second. We cool, laptop? All right, I think we're back. Oh boy, those fans just kicked on. Holy crap. All right, let's turn that off. So that actually felt pretty good. The rotation was probably a little off, like by a couple degrees, but I pretty much had it. Once you get to the point where it looks good, all we're going to do is produce the final render. So over here, there's a button called R. Remember how we did that before? Make sure you're still in this viewport. We're going to hit the blue R, and this is going to start the process of us getting the final image. And I'm not going to bore you guys with waiting for the render to finish because it will take a bit. Every pass it's doing where it spirals from the center is it adding a new sample. So a sample is, think of a sample as like an extra point for quality. Every single pixel in here, you'll see it wipe across here in a second. Where is it? There we go. Every time it wipes, all those little pixels you're seeing are getting a little dot inside of the pixel, and it's called a sample. That sample is trying to figure out the light angle, the color, the geometry, what the material's doing, are there textures, is there bounced light, what are the shadows doing. It's calculating everything. And the more you let this thing go, the more passes it does, wiping through it with more samples, the cleaner it's going to get. Now currently it's only 3% in or 4% in. It's going to keep going and going until it eventually finishes. Now it's going to keep going until, it's not going to go forever. It will stop typically when it gets to the max sample. Now there are some other factors that kind of affect this to why it doesn't always go up to 256 different passes or 256 samples. But that's a little bit too much for you guys to worry about right now for the first time you've rendered. But there are a lot of other settings in here that you can kind of use in other classes later to finesse how this works, like the pixel variants. We're going to talk a little bit more about like the light samples down here and controlling it in the integrator down below. For now, what I want you guys to do, and I'm going to leave this up for a second so you can take a screenshot. I want you guys, for your renders for this week and next week, to have your max sample set to 256. So it's usually 128. So this is what it usually looks like. You're going to go to 256. And if you're ever not sure what the default number is, by the way, if you just simply click on any of those attributes on the left, you can revert to default. So if I, like, let's say I screwed up pixel variance, I did something like this, which is terrible. If you just click on the right side of that and do revert to default, it will pop back to the default number. So that's a really good way just to put it back if you think you may have messed something up. But you're going to put this to 256. I want you to go down to light and do 4. Indirect samples, 4. So this setup right here is going to be pretty good for all your renders this month. And probably when you get to shading and lighting too. And eventually when you get to shading and lighting too, we're also going to talk about BXDF samples, which is the quality for the material and the texture. So we're not really doing any materials yet. I might slap a material on here in a little bit before we go, just so you can see it. But for right now, we're just going to kind of stick with these 3. All right, let's close out of that. And I have a video that talks about that with a lot more detail if you want to check that out. So I'm at 15% almost. Yeah, we're just going to stop it. Now, if I want to save it out, and this is clearly not a really clean render. If I middle mouse wheel and zoom in and left click, I can move around. I mean, this is quite a bit of grain in it. But if I did want to save it, you know, even as like a rough draft, we could do that. You want to make sure that your catalog has burn-in mapping on save turned on. This needs to be enabled so when you save your image, it looks exactly like this guy. If this is off, you guys are going to notice that the image you save is too dark. It's not a huge issue for me because I can fix it in Nuke. I just have to take your image, go into Nuke, change a couple settings, and I can pop it back to the right intensity. But I just want you guys to get in the habit of turning it on almost all the time. And there are cases where you don't want it on, but we'll talk about that in another class. So for this, now we're going to go to File, Export File, not Save Session. I know that looks very tempting. Not that guy. Export File. Okay, it's going to pop up. I'm going to go to the desktop, and we're going to do, we'll call this day render. It's already set to PNG, so we're going to change that, but day render, let me just double check that. I think that's right. Oh, no, that is not right. Environment day. Jeez. There we go. Hit save, and boom, it did it. We'll just kind of close out, and then you can see back here, there she is. And just comparing that, that does feel pretty good. It's not quite as clean, obviously, because I didn't let the render finish, but that is still very close to matching the reference. Okay? So not too bad. So that's me saving the image. Okay. Let's jump into... let's do the night one real fast. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The other one's pretty much the same thing. This is just a different image, but again, you're just doing the same process. Rotate the light, load in your different image. Oh, you want to put it on the display layer. I didn't show you that real quick. Display layer, remember, is back here. I want you to make sure you're naming your lights. So I'm going to call this Pixar Dome Light Day. So I know this is for the day image. And with it selected over here in the display layers, we're going to hit that button on the right. Makes a new layer, just like you guys did way back in the first week. or not the first week, the second week. It is going to add that to a layer, so I can turn the visibility on and off, right? We're going to double click on the layer. I'm going to call this day layer. Save. Now at this point, I'm done with the day image. I don't want to delete it, so we're just going to turn the visibility off, but it's still here if I ever want to go back to it. Like if I give you a critique and I'm like, hey, the day render had some issues, turn the light back on, rotate it 90 degrees, try to get the shadow from the right angle. You can still do that because it's already built. You just have to turn on the layer, hide the other layer that's visible, and then rotate the light and quickly crank out the render. Okay, let's disable it. So let's do it again a little bit quicker, and this time we're going to do it for the night image. So we're going to skip past sunrise. Here's this one. Now the night one is a little tricky. So it is a Pixar dome light. It's using a different texture. That's all the same. But you'll notice that it's a lot darker. And there's another light source we haven't used before, Pixar rectangular light. So this one means we have to make another light. We're going to use the other secondary light source to fake the moonlight. So all this white you're seeing right here, this kind of soft white, this is a stylized moonlight effect that we're doing. That is the dome light is not going to be able to produce. Occasionally, the HDR image isn't going to give you the look you want, so you have to kind of mix it with some other lights to get the right result. This is going to be one of those cases. So let's do it a little bit quicker. I'm going to right-click on the light source up at the top. We're going to make our Pixar dome light, and let's just immediately name it. Let's get that out of the way. Underscore night. Let's also do the display layer. We just did that. That's pretty simple, right? Click on the light. Over here, we're going to hit the button on the right side, and I'm just going to hit the little visibility just to make sure it works. Beautiful. That's working. So we're going to double click and call this night layer. Okay. And now with this selected, let's go in the attribute editor and let's just load in the image it's looking for. Okay. So this wants Venice Dawn 4K. We're going to hit the folder, Venice Dawn 4K, load. There it is. Oh, this one showed the path. That was weird. I don't know why the other one didn't, but this one is showing me my path. You can tell where it's located. Looks great. Okay, there it is. It's beautiful. We have our sun back here. It's a very cool shot. So we're probably gonna get a lot of blue out of this. But let's turn it on and let's just see what we're getting, and I'm gonna compare that to the reference image. Here's the reference. Now, one of the parts that does take a little bit of practice is we have to really look at reference and try to analyze it and understand how do we get from point A to point B. Like we have a problem in front of us. How do we figure out how to do this thing? So we know we have two light sources, and currently the issue with this thing is that the illumination is too bright, right? It's way, way too bright. Because this is even too bright with the sun behind the building, right? So if I rotate it, like, yeah, I'm eventually going to get sunlight. Like, I can turn it, and this will probably show me sunlight eventually if I keep spinning it. I'm sure it's going to look cool, right? It's still kind of cool looking. I don't know if we're going to get the same shadows, but we're going to do it anyway. Whoops. But you can kind of tell, like, it's getting softer, but, like, it doesn't really feel like the reference. It's just getting even brighter than we had it before. And you'll notice the shadows aren't even really that defined. Like, they're there, but why are they not like this? Now, there's a couple reasons for that. Part of the issue is that even though there is a sun back there, because you're seeing dawn, the sun is probably really low currently on the horizon. And there's probably a good chance there's a bunch of clouds back there. And so the sun is being diffused so much that you're not really getting direct illumination. You're just getting this kind of like overall brighter light, but it's not sharp enough to give you really defined shadows. So what I'm going to do is let me turn it off for a second so I can go back here and just zero that out. Okay. Let's turn it back on. So I'm just resetting it back to default, zero rotation. Our problem is that I know as soon as I go in here, even if I know there's another light source, when I add a light, what's going to happen to the render I'm currently working on? It's only going to get brighter, right? When you turn on more lights, it gets brighter. It doesn't get darker. You don't have lights that suck away light. Like it just gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Light is addition. And so my issue is I'm still not even dark enough. I have one light in here, and this still is already too bright. This is where you get into changing some of the settings on the light source. So you do have to actually darken this guy. This is the first one we've had to tweak. So we have two ways to do it. I have intensity and exposure. I have some videos in the next week's project in 4.1 where I do talk about this in quite a bit of detail. For now, all I want you guys to worry about is using exposure. But they do basically the same thing, but you only need to use this guy. The way exposure works is every time you go down or up one whole value, you are either halving or doubling the intensity. So for example, if I go from 0, which is default, to -1 and hit enter, I have just cut the intensity in half. If I go from -1 to -2, I just cut this intensity in half again. So it's like saying divided by 2, divided by 2, divided by 2. And again, -3, another, cut that in half. So you keep cutting it in half over and over and over. That probably makes sense. Now, that's actually kind of handy because as an artist, when we're critiquing light, it's very easy to compare something, and you can make these really quick judgments like, that kind of feels like half as bright as this shadow, right? That area right there is half as bright as this. So I can just quickly go in there and do that. Like -1, I'd look at like the shadow, and like I know it doesn't have the moonlight, but if I just look at this little section right here where the moon isn't hitting it, like that's not that far off, right? So I would feel pretty good about keeping it here. Hint, hint, for anybody watching the video later. It's going to be a great way for me to figure out who actually watches the live session, by the way. Because I'm basically giving you the answer. And if you go up, you're now doubling the intensity. We definitely don't want to do that. This is like making the scene go nuclear. If you want to do the effect of a nuclear bomb going off behind the camera, you could totally do that. If the sun ever does this, by the way, and this is what it's doing to the scene, that is called the apocalypse. It's all over. All right, let's put that back down to -1. So I've got a pretty good intensity, okay? I'm going to try to get this extra light in here just so I can see them both together. Okay, so let's go back over here. Okay, so we have a Pixar rectangular light. So I'm going to go to the first button and make this guy. This is a Pixar rectangular light. So we're just going to click. It's here. I'm going to name it Pixar rectangular light night, so I just kind of know these two, go together. And I also want to add that to the night layer, because currently this light isn't part of the layer, because when I made the layer, it only had the dome light. And you can see the rectangular light's just hanging out over here. It's the same spot where your telescope appeared when you brought that in. It's just in the building. Let me just move that out so you can see it. This is what it looks like. You got the little R for render band, a little stick pointing out the front. This is just showing you where it's aiming. That's the back side over here. But I want to add that to the layer. So if you have the light selected, right click on that night layer. Let's add selected objects. It's on there. So now if I turn the layer off, you can see both lights disappear. The dome light and the rectangular light. So it's all working. Now what we're going to do is back up. Let me get the attribute editor open again. I want to move the light in the right position. So what I'm going to do is hit R. And let me actually use E because I want to rotate it. I'm going to face it towards the building right now so you can see that. Okay, so I'm facing towards a building. And you're not getting a whole lot of light. It's sort of aiming this way. We'll turn it even a little bit more. Now I could boost it up. What I want to do though is let's like try scaling it up. Like, because I can tell it's coming from the right somewhere. Let's just scale it up bigger. Okay, I'm not seeing much. Keep going. Keep going. And you can see something starting to happen if I keep boosting it. So if you make the light source bigger, eventually, yes, it will start to show up in the scene. But that's not really the way we want to be doing the lighting. Because the issue, let me get this closer so you can kind of see this, is when you scale the light up, I'll even make it bigger, it's making the light brighter, but it's also affecting the shadows. because the scale of the light also has a big impact on shadow quality. A bigger light source produces softer shadows. You can also see it's kind of weird because it's cutting through my scene. So there's a really important button you guys are going to want to turn on before you start scaling lights around. What you're going to do is when you click on the light, you're going to go to the attribute editor and then look for the advanced section. Advanced is a little checkbox here called normalize, which I mentioned quite a bit in the videos. We're going to turn that on. Now it is going to get kind of dark when I do that. What this checkbox does is it breaks the connection between the scale of the light and how bright it is, because we usually don't want the light size to always make it brighter. That's very annoying when you're trying to really tweak the lighting, and every time you want to like affect the shadows or scale the light, it kind of stinks when it keeps changing the intensity. So I don't like those to affect each other. So we're going to turn it on just to prevent that from happening. Now from here, it's not bright enough. So that's when I go into exposure and I just start cranking this guy up until I eventually see it. Now you don't have to do it one by one, like 1, 2. You can make some pretty big leaps, and if you overshoot it, that's fine. Eventually you'll cut it back. I'll go way over. I'll try 1,000 or 10,000. Now it doesn't look good, but at least I know the light's working. I just went way too high. So let's try 1,000 instead of 10,000. Okay, I'm just getting rid of zeros. 100. 10. Now 10 isn't too bad, right? It's not correct. Let me actually turn the render on and off again because I think it kind of got messed up. There we go. Yeah, my camera popped back for some reason. We're going to move this back a little bit and over and up. And I just want to I'm trying to get that little spot out of the frame because it was too close to the edge of the building. And I'm going to boost this up to maybe 11 to double it. Let's double it again to 12. Because remember, every time I go up one value, I'm doubling it. Just like going down a number will have the way it looks. What do you guys think? So actually, I'm going to have you guys kind of guide me through this just a little bit here. Let's say I go to 13. I'll give you guys a second just to kind of look this over. What do you think is wrong with the lighting? Like if you had to do a self-critique on yourself at this point, what do you feel like is wrong? Is there something with the color? Is it with the placement of the light? Are the shadows different? Is it the quality of the shadows? Like, are they too soft, too sharp? Yeah, exactly, right? So we have way too bright on the wall, so it's very intense right here, which means it's really close. You're all right about that. It's absolutely correct. So I need to figure out how do I reduce this, but so I probably want to get it away from the wall a little bit, right? So that's not good. Some other things I'm noticing is that over here on this side, it's like the shadows, yeah, it's too thick, right? Like the shadows are going too far over, so we're getting too much shadow. So they're all kind of related, actually. The two things you're talking about are all coming from the same issue. If it's too close to the wall, it means we're too far this way towards it, right? But if you're also too close to the wall, it means that you're getting an extreme angle with the light, which is giving you exaggerated shadows. It's the same reason why when the sun sets and you have those low angles where the sun is really low in the horizon, you get those crazy elongated shadows. You're actually seeing that same rule happening right here. It's so close to the wall that you're getting really long shadows. And so what I can do is just pull that back. Let's just back it up, pull it away from the wall, and you'll see how the shadows are starting to crunch in a little bit, right? Let's maybe go. Now what I'm seeing here, I'm going to show you a trick. I'm going to use this button here, the fourth one over, called crop. When you turn this on, you can draw over part of the image. So I'm going to crop and just marquee select over this section right here in the middle and turn crop off. So now it's rendering in the box, not outside of that. That's going to help save us a little bit of time. And I'm just going to look at this one shadow right here. So I'm still getting a little bit too much thickness with the shadow. So I'm going to keep pulling that out this way. Right? Now it's kind of angling down a little bit. See that, like that little lip and how the shadow goes downward? Mine is relatively level. So I need to go up with the light. See how the shadow is starting to tilt down a little bit? I'm just trying to control where the shadow's aiming. Look at that. The balcony railing is getting the same angle. We don't have the hotspot anymore. We're actually getting this thing pretty close. Now, there's also some issues where I think because I have backed it up, I might need to also like rotate it so it's kind of aiming at the balcony still. Mine was sort of aiming off to the side. That's not too bad. But I'm pretty close, right? And I think I'm kind of close enough now where I would have to let the render go and just refine for a little bit so I can get a cleaner image, and then I can kind of, get a better idea of where I'm at. But this already feels pretty good. I think the last thing maybe I would do, I don't remember if I used temperature or not. Let me just double check it. I think I did. Yeah, I probably did. Actually, can you guys see like that little bit of like a pinkish warmth in here? This is like a bit more like a white cool color. That one's really hard to see unless you're like kind of strain your eyes a little bit. But this is more of like a white blue. This is like a very subtle amount of like a pink that's in there. So there is something on the light I did in my reference called color temperature. I talk about it in the video. You're going to do this a lot next week. Color temperature, you don't have to really worry about turning it on and like doing much with this thing. We'll talk about this in week 4. But for my reference, since I have you guys here, I did turn temperature on the light. We'll talk about that next week. We're kind of running out of time to get into this whole thing, but color temperature is how we measure light with kelvins. So if you guys are familiar with like kelvins, like the temperature, you're just putting kelvin's values in here, and that automatically forces the light to have the right color. It's like a warm to cool slider, basically. Our sun uses the same thing. So you actually can find out our sun's Kelvin value and make the light look like it's the same color as our sun. So it's kind of cool, but we'll get more into that next week. So right here, this is a pretty good render. And from there, like if I like it, just kill the viewport, go over there, do your final render. And then you can save that thing out. Yeah, using the Kelvin thing, really pretty much anybody can use Kelvin. It just comes down to personal preference. If you guys like using real physical values pulled from the real world, or do you like the ability to like manually pick your own colors and have more artistic control? It doesn't really matter if it's for character animators or any 3D artist. It's kind of fair game. It's just another tool you can turn on if you want to use it. And the other ones here, I probably have like another minute I can show you here, but I do want to show you the reference images for my bonus, just so you have a couple ideas. Like this is, I did a couple where I had lighting on the inside, and I played around with some different exterior lighting, like some warm, and I have like a white light right above the telescope casting down and giving us some moonlight. This one was kind of fun. I did this one actually last month. Like some purple light. It's like a light inside, up above, almost in the ceiling, casting down the wall to give me this like gradient of purple and like a pink. And I have some different green lights tucked in behind this post that are casting upwards to give me some pretty cool, interesting, like exaggerated shadow lines. And another light above, kind of like the purple one, that's really long, like a beam, casting downward to give me another gradient. And here's another one, kind of similar to this one. There's like different colors, but I'm basically doing the same thing where lights are tucked in on the balcony, aiming up, and one's coming down. I got green lights, hidden behind the door, lights from below the ground. You guys don't have to match them. I just want you to have fun and see what you can what you can come up with. But it's really easy to really play around with all these different light setups, and I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun doing that. So just really quickly, just to show you an example, like if you even wanted to make like the sky a different color, like if you wanted to say, I want to make my planet be Mars. I don't know why we have this type of Venice-looking building on Mars, but we're going to do it. I could go even to the dome light and say, actually, let me save this first before I do this. Let me call this light. Oh. So with this, I could be like, all right, I want to go to the color. I'm going to leave the sky image in here, but I'm going to go to the color, and I'm going to tint it into like a warmer tone. I'm just going to find like an orange and start boosting up saturation. And this will act, it's almost like mixing paint colors. Oh, is it still going? Let me try resetting that. There we go. Yeah, you see how the blue's kind of like fading out a little bit? I'm just pushing this like orange tone in here. It is not liking me. Yeah, I got a pretty bad lag at the moment for some reason. There we go. Bring that up. Yeah, it's because the yellow and the blue are mixing, and we're getting like this kind of green. So if I start shifting towards red, we'll eventually hit an orange. Yeah, I think my poor laptop is starting to hit its limits here with the OBS recording and stream on top of everything else. But you can kind of get in there. You can play around with your lights. Lights have their own colors. You can decide like, I'm going to do a purple there. Maybe I want to do some crazy like intense blues from this sky. I'm just going to put in a color, right? You can see even this looks kind of interesting. And then we could maybe right click. We'll do, let's do a sphere light. And real quick, what color do you guys want me to put on the interior? What are you guys feeling? This is a Pixar spherical light. This would be kind of like a ball. Think of it like a light bulb or like a globe that kind of shoots light out in all directions. What color do you want me to do? I'll let you pick. We'll just kind of throw it back inside somewhere. Green, love it. Let's do it. All right, so here's our light color. We're going to pick just our green, something like a little mint green. We'll try that out. And we'll just boost the exposure up until I see something. It should, yeah, oh, there it is. I can see it. Yeah, it's working. There it is. Let's do 15. It's kind of interesting because all the doors that you guys have moved before, they're actually going to affect the lighting as you move it around. Like you can kind of see if I get it in the right spot, and depending on how I open and close the doors, I can try to get the light to cast. See all these little light patterns I'm getting on the balcony right there? So I can also decide I want to like, shut these more. If I get it so it's pretty far back, it's sometimes possible to get the door framing to make the shadow lines from the light. It's a little tricky because you have to play around with the distance. But yeah, there's a couple shadow patterns forming on the ground now where it's cutting through the different pieces of wood. So we're even getting some interesting creepy green light on the inside. And you can duplicate lights, Control D, and if you want another green light, you could throw it on the outside somewhere. Oh geez. Well, or maybe not. That light is really bright. So we have a green light inside, and I'm just moving a duplicated green light below. That's kind of interesting. You can see here, though, because I duplicated it, and the light's very tiny. See how sharp the shadows are? But if the light's bigger, watch the shadows. See how they diffuse out? So larger lights are creating softer shadows. So I don't know if this is a good look. Yeah, this totally feels like this is like where we're keeping the kryptonite. I don't think Superman is going anywhere near this damn building. I'll tell you that. This is the last place he wants to go. So if you guys want to like make it themed, if you have like some reference images or color palettes you want to try playing around with, I just want you guys to have fun. Like there's a couple of minimum requirements where I'm expecting you to like, at least use a couple lights. Or I thought I wrote that. Oh, apparently I don't have any requirements at all. I thought I was going to give you guys more requirements where I said use at least 2 lights, but I think that's a character project. But just have fun. Use a Pixar dome light, add your own light sources, mix and match, see what you can kind of come up with. If you want to make different bonus images, I'd love to see it. Cool. And then at the end of the day, do your final render, use the R, just like we've been showing you before. Save your Maya file, turn in your Maya file with the project, and you're pretty much good to go. So that's week 3. A lot of fun rendering. And then week 4, we're going to talk about your character lighting, and we're going to go over some stuff in Nuke. And then we're done. We're almost through the month. All right, guys. Well, I think that about does it for our live session. So thanks for hanging out. Oh, you guys can still hear the cat? He's not even in this room. I can hear him in the background. I love how that's actually traveling to the microphone. He's been angry all day. But I'll send you guys a recording tomorrow as soon as I get back to my office, and then I will catch up with you guys either tomorrow or over the weekend. Yep. See you guys. And if anyone needs to get a hold of me for the crashing issue, like Aspen, just hit me up on Discord, and then I will talk to you guys one-on-one. All right, everybody have a good night.